From childhood, we were twins, identical dresses, hairstyles. Even our voices. Mom taught us to adjust to the same pitch. It looks prettier, she would say. But at 16, I found a box of videotapes in the closet where my sister and I were different children. Growing up, I never questioned why everything had to match. When I woke up in the morning, my clothes were already laid out on the bed, perfectly pressed and identical to what she would be wearing. The same blue dress with white collar, the same patent leather shoes, even the same ribbons in our hair tied in exactly the same way. Mom would spend an hour each morning making sure our hair fell at precisely the same angle, measuring with a ruler to ensure the parts were identical. The thing that bothered me most wasn't the clothes or the hair, it was the voice training. Every evening after dinner, Mom would sit us down at the kitchen table with a tape recorder. She'd play the same monotone recording over and over, making us repeat phrases until we sounded exactly alike. I remember my throat being sore for weeks when I was 7, because my natural voice was deeper than hers, and Mom insisted I had to match her higher pitch perfectly. She would record our voices and play them back, comparing the sound waves on some kind of machine she kept in the basement. School was the worst part. Other kids would stare at us like we were some kind of circus act. We had to walk in sync, carry the same books, even eat the same lunch at exactly the same pace. If one of us finished our sandwich before the other, we'd have to wait. Mom had given us strict instructions about maintaining the image at all times. Teachers found it amusing at first, but I could see the concern in their eyes as the years went by. Nobody said anything, though. This was a small town where people minded their own business. The breaking point came when I was 13 and developed an obsession with astronomy. I found an old telescope at a garage sale and begged Mom to let me buy it. She refused, saying it would create inconsistency. When I persisted, she locked me in my room for 3 days, only bringing me bread and water. She told everyone I was sick with the flu. That's when I realized something was fundamentally wrong with our situation, but I was too scared to do anything about it. By age 16, the differences between us were becoming harder to hide. She was naturally artistic, always doodling in the margins of her notebooks when she thought nobody was looking. I was more analytical, preferring math and science. Mom would catch these moments and immediately correct them. The art supplies would disappear, and she'd be forced to solve math problems for hours. When I showed interest in reading about space, my books would vanish, replaced with the same romance novel she was reading. That's when I found the box. Mom had gone to the store, and she was taking a shower. I was looking for extra blankets in the hall closet when I knocked over a cardboard box hidden behind the old winter coats. Videotapes scattered across the floor, each labeled with dates going back years. My hand shook as I picked up the first one, dated just after my 5th birthday. I crept down to the basement where Mom kept an old VCR. The tape was grainy, but clear enough. There we were, age 5, but we looked completely different. She had curly red hair while mine was straight and brown. She was chubby with round cheeks, while I was skinny with sharp features. Even our mannerisms were different. She was shy, hiding behind furniture, while I was bold, making faces at the camera. We were wearing different clothes, playing with different toys, and most shocking of all, we were speaking in our natural voices, which sounded nothing alike. I watched tape after tape, documenting a gradual transformation. Hair dyes, styling treatments, voice coaching sessions that looked more like torture. There were scenes of us crying, refusing to cooperate, and what happened next made my stomach turn. Punishment sessions. Isolation. Food deprivation. Slowly, over months and years, 2 completely different children were molded into identical copies. But the most disturbing part was Mom herself. In the early tapes, she was clinical, taking notes, measuring our responses. She wore a lab coat and spoke in technical terms I didn't understand. This wasn't motherly love or some quirky family tradition. This was an experiment, and we were the subjects. Update 1. After discovering the tapes, I couldn't look at Mom the same way. Every morning routine felt like a performance. Every matched outfit felt like a costume. I started paying attention to details I'd never noticed before. The way she would take notes after our interactions, writing in a journal she kept locked in her desk. The phone calls she'd make late at night, speaking in hushed tones about progress reports and behavioral modifications. I began testing small rebellions to see how she'd react. I'd deliberately eat my breakfast slower or wear my socks slightly differently. Her response was immediate and intense. The voice training sessions became longer and more brutal. She introduced new exercises, making us repeat the same phrases hundreds of times until our voices were hoarse. When I tried to assert any independence, the punishments became more creative and psychological. The most chilling moment came when I noticed she was documenting everything. Hidden cameras in our room, recording devices in the common areas. I found notebooks filled with observations about our behavior, our physical development, even our dreams. She had been writing down everything we said in our sleep for years. But the breakthrough came when I discovered she wasn't working alone. While searching through her desk for the journal key, I found correspondence with other people. Official-looking documents with government seals, funding reports, progress updates sent to something called the Behavioral Modification Research Institute. The return addresses were from facilities I'd never heard of, but the letterhead looked official and scary. One letter mentioned similar subjects in other locations. We weren't the only ones. This was happening to other children, maybe dozens of them, all across the country. The letter discussed success rates and termination protocols like we were lab rats. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely read the rest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how many other kids were going through the same thing. Were they also being forced to match someone else? Were they also having their personalities stripped away bit by bit? The thought made me physically sick. I started paying closer attention to her phone conversations. She would always go to the basement when important calls came in, but sound carried through the old heating vents. I heard fragments of conversations about phase completion and final assessments. The word termination kept coming up, and it didn't sound like they were talking about ending a job. The worst part was realizing that everything I thought I knew about my identity was a lie. Was my love of science real, or just a remnant of who I used to be before the conditioning? Were my memories of early childhood even accurate, or had they been altered somehow? I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. But then something unexpected happened. She started showing signs of stress too. I caught her taking pills she tried to hide, and she had dark circles under her eyes like she wasn't sleeping. Her hands would shake during our morning routine, and sometimes she'd stare at us with this expression I couldn't read. Almost like guilt, but that seemed impossible for someone who had put us through this. Update 2. 3 weeks after finding the tapes, everything changed in a way I never saw coming. I had been gathering evidence, planning some kind of escape, when she came to our room in the middle of the night. She was crying, which I had never seen before. She sat on the edge of my bed and did something that shocked me more than anything else so far. She started talking to us like we were real people, not experiment subjects. She told us her name wasn't even what we'd been calling her. She had been recruited for this project when she was barely out of college, desperate for work and drowning in student loans. They had told her it was a groundbreaking study in behavioral psychology that would help children with developmental disorders. The lies had built up over the years until she was in too deep to back out. But here's the twist that floored me completely. She wasn't just our handler or researcher. She was subject too. They had been studying her as much as us, documenting how far a person could be pushed to dehumanize children in the name of science. Her every interaction with us had been monitored and evaluated. She had been living under the same kind of surveillance and control, just with different parameters. The real experiment wasn't just about turning two different kids into identical copies. It was about studying the complete breakdown of human compassion and parental instinct. They wanted to see if they could create a person who would systematically destroy childhood innocence without question. She had been their success story until recently, when something inside her started to crack. She showed us documents that revealed the true scope of the project. There were dozens of family units like ours, each testing different variables. Some were studying twins who were separated and raised differently. Others were looking at how identical treatment could make unrelated children seem like siblings. Our unit was specifically designed to test identity erasure and personality reconstruction. But the most terrifying revelation was about the timeline. The project was scheduled to conclude when we turned 18, just 6 months away. The final phase involved what they called data harvesting, followed by subject retirement. She had been instructed to document our final psychological profiles and then arrange for our elimination. They couldn't risk us revealing the project to the outside world. However, she had been secretly documenting everything with the intention of exposing the whole operation. For the past 2 years, she had been copying files, recording conversations, and building a case against the people who had manipulated all of us. She had contacted a journalist who specialized in government conspiracy stories, and they were planning to break the story wide open. But she needed our help. The evidence would be more powerful if we could testify about our experiences. She wanted us to work with her to bring down the entire network, but it meant putting ourselves in incredible danger. The people running this project had unlimited resources and no conscience about eliminating threats. The choice she gave us was impossible. We could run away and try to start new lives, always looking over our shoulders, never knowing if they'd catch up with us. Or we could stay and fight, knowing that we might not survive, but potentially saving other children from going through what we had experienced. As I listened to her talk, I realized that the person I had thought was my captor was actually as much a victim as we were. She had been isolated from her family, cut off from normal relationships, and forced to live a lie for over a decade. The guilt and trauma had been eating away at her, and she was finally ready to risk everything to make it right. Final update. The last 6 months of my old life were unlike anything I could have imagined. We didn't run, and we didn't go to the authorities. Instead, we did something far more dangerous and ultimately more satisfying. We decided to turn the experiment back on them. She had discovered that our graduation was scheduled to take place at a facility 3 states away, where all the subjects from different units would be brought together for final evaluation. This would be the first time all the evidence of their operation would be in one place, along with most of the key researchers and administrators. It was also when they planned to eliminate everyone who could expose them. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had taught us to be perfect actors, to suppress our true personalities and become whatever they wanted us to be. We used those skills against them. For months, we pretended to be the compliant, successfully conditioned subjects they expected while secretly documenting everything and coordinating with the journalist. The most dangerous part was maintaining our cover while other subjects and their handlers arrived at the facility. I met kids who had been through variations of our experience that were even more horrific. Some had been conditioned to believe they were different genders, others had been given false memories of traumatic events, and a few had been subjected to medical procedures that altered their physical appearance permanently. But seeing all of us together had an unexpected effect on the researchers. Some of them started questioning what they had been part of. A few handlers, like our caretaker, had been documenting evidence of their own. The psychological toll of the project had been breaking down the staff as much as the subjects. The breakthrough came when we discovered that the lead researcher had been planning to eliminate not just the subjects, but also the handlers who knew too much. Our caretaker wasn't the only one who had been marked for retirement. This created a split among the staff, with some deciding to cooperate with our plan to expose everything. On the night before our scheduled graduation ceremony, everything fell apart in the most spectacular way possible. The journalist had been working with federal investigators who had been tracking rumors of the project for years. They raided the facility with warrants and media crews, catching everyone in the act. But the real shock came when we learned the true scope of what had been happening. The project wasn't just some rogue government experiment. It was connected to a network of adoption agencies, foster care systems, and research institutions that had been trafficking children for decades. Our case became the key that unlocked investigations into dozens of other operations. The aftermath was chaotic and painful. Reuniting with our biological families was complicated because we had been missing for so long that some had been declared dead. Learning our real names and histories felt like putting on clothes that didn't fit anymore. The conditioning had been so thorough that returning to our original personalities was like learning to walk again. The legal proceedings took years. Many of the researchers and administrators were prosecuted, but some disappeared before they could be arrested. The facilities were shut down, but we knew there were probably others operating somewhere else. The journalist won awards for the exposé, and the story became a catalyst for major reforms in research ethics and child protection laws. As for me and my sister, we chose to stay in contact even though we weren't related. We had been through something together that nobody else could understand. We both struggled with identity issues and trust problems, but we helped each other navigate the process of becoming real people again. The most unexpected outcome was that our caretaker, whose real name I finally learned, became something like a real mother figure to both of us. She had sacrificed her career and safety to save us, and the guilt she carried was almost unbearable. But she was also the only person who truly understood what we had been through, and she dedicated the rest of her life to helping other survivors of similar projects. Today, I work with organizations that investigate child trafficking and research abuse. I use the skills that were forced on me as a child, the ability to observe and analyze human behavior, to help identify and shut down operations that exploit children. It's my way of making sure that what happened to us serves some greater purpose. The strangest part is that I'm grateful for some aspects of the experience. It taught me resilience and gave me a unique perspective on human nature that I probably wouldn't have developed otherwise. I learned that people are capable of both incredible cruelty and unexpected kindness, sometimes within the same person. But I still struggle with basic things that most people take for granted. Making decisions about what to wear or how to style my hair can trigger anxiety attacks. I have trouble trusting my own preferences because I'm never sure if they're real or just remnants of conditioning. Some days I feel like I'm still performing a role rather than living authentically. The project files indicated that there were at least 50 other family units that were never found or rescued. I think about those kids every day, wondering if they're still trapped in similar situations or if they managed to escape. Sometimes I get contacted by people who think they might have been part of related experiments, and I do what I can to help them find answers. The people who designed and funded these projects are still out there, probably working on new ways to exploit vulnerable people. But at least now there are people watching for the signs and survivors who are willing to speak out. The work isn't finished, but we proved that even the most sophisticated systems of control can be defeated when people decide to fight back. Looking back, the most important thing I learned is that identity isn't something that can be completely erased or manufactured. Even under the most extreme conditions, some core part of who we are survives. It might be buried or distorted, but it's still there, waiting for the chance to emerge again. That's what gives me hope for all the other survivors who are still finding their way back to themselves.